Hey guys, so we're going to be doing something a little bit different here. We're having so much fun doing the new batch, and we've developed kind of an ardent following. A couple of people in particular. There's one guy that's commenting on almost every single video, and we appreciate it so much. We love you guys. You guys are the reasons we're doing these videos, and you're the reason that we podcast. So the whole idea about the new batch was we were going to take a look at all of the major networks and all the new shows that they drop in the fall season, the mid-season, and then in the spring-summer seasons. But as a lot of people have been pointing out, you're leaving out a bunch of shows. Like Amazon dropped The Tick, and it dropped Lore, and you guys aren't reviewing those. And, you know, that's kind of a good point. Especially seeing as though I've binge-watched both of them. So what we're doing today is we're starting out something different. It's still going to be New Batch, but it's going to have a different kind of like tag logo called Bingeables. We're going to binge-watch and review in real time The Punisher, because I've really been looking forward to the show for a while now. This is the first spin-off from Marvel, as far as the Marvel Netflix shows. And that in itself makes me over the moon excited, because if this one is successful, then that opens up the floodgates for a variety of other characters that we could be getting. Like, finally, a good version, this is really what I want, a good version of Ghost Rider. How badass would that be? I mean, Nicolas Cage wasn't terrible. He wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but he wasn't terrible. So a good, dark, gritty version of Ghost Rider just feels like it would be natural to me. The downside is this looks like it might be the last Marvel Netflix show, because talks are that Disney is going to take over that and put them over on their own streaming channel. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure if Netflix is going to retain the rights and keep all of the shows that they've already released on Netflix. They might all end up going over to Disney. Which is cool, but also nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm a huge Disney fan. I mean, hell, I'm wearing a Disney hat anyway, Chernabog from Fantasia. But I'm afraid that they might try to Disneyfy things a little bit too much. But I've been rambling way too much about this. Let's dive in and let's watch Punisher. Okay, so the people that were bitching that Iron Fist was too slow, they're not allowed to say anything else, okay? Good first episode, in my personal opinion. Wraps up, first off, spoilers. It wraps up with the original Frank Castle storyline that was started in Daredevil Season 2. Does that even before the opening credits, which, by the way, Netflix is killing this shit as far as the opening credits, man. They're almost on HBO level territory with this. And HBO has some of the best opening credits of all time. So, opening credits good. Wraps up with that storyline. Cuts to Frank Castle, now under a different name, working as a construction worker, basically specializing in demolition. It's fine. And then pretty much nothing happens for 3 hours. You get to meet a couple of characters. Realistically, it probably could have all been wrapped up in about 10 minutes as opposed to 30 to 35. You really got to understand a couple of the characters, but it's going to be kind of for naught by the end of the episode. And first off, who the fuck says let's boogaloo non-ironically in their lives? Maybe I should start, but I don't know. Decent first episode. Nobody's allowed to say shit about Iron Fist being too slow ever again, especially if you like the show. Or at least the first episode, after the first episode. The change up with Frank Castle is very interesting. I'm going to reiterate the fact, by the end of the episode, it is pretty much official. He is not a hero at all. So the glorification of the violence, I don't see it. He's barely an anti-hero. If anything, I'd say he's almost full villain. Force of nature killing machine. basically a god of death and a force of destruction. There was an interesting character named Donnie. It's going to be interesting to see if he sticks around, considering what happened with his story arc. Essentially, if I counted right, about 10 dead in the last 10 minutes of this episode, which was some of the darkest shit that I've seen on a Marvel show. How the fuck was the Punisher a Marvel property, man? Because this is brutal. This is absolutely brutal. It was I Spit on Your Grave mixed with Last House on the Left mixed with like Saw and Hostel. I mean, there was some brutal shit in the last 10 minutes of this movie. It was awesome to watch, don't get me wrong, but it was really brutal, and I'm kind of glad that Lance got what was coming to him. They kind of took away a villain that I thought we were going to be having, for at least the way Marvel shows tend to work. The first half big bad, probably won't know who the second half big bad is for quite some time. Admittedly, I'm not huge into the Punisher comic books, so I don't know if he really has a big bad like Batman has the Joker, Spider-Man with like Doc Ock or the Green Goblin. I don't know who Punisher's big bad is, or frankly that much about his rogues gallery. I know he shows up in a lot of shit, and apparently he killed Jughead at one point. But I don't know. I'm in. I'm definitely in. It was a really slow episode. There was a while there where I'm just like, dude, maybe I should watch this episode at like 1.5 speed just to get this over a little bit quicker. But no, it shaped up well. It definitely shaped up well. I'm feeling Frank. I get what he's going through, the trauma that he went through, not to mention the violence of his past actions. But here's the thing, he doesn't seem to have learned anything from his past actions. It just seems like it's now a part of him that he's kept caged. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Wow. Okay, so we have a plot now. So this episode introduced Micro, who is trying to, find or utilize or pull Frank Castle's strings. So it's almost like a game of cat and mouse with a reverse cat and mouse involved with it. It also gives us the reintroduction of Karen Page from Daredevil. So she's back. She's helping out the Punisher. And emotional, as always. I don't know. I guess maybe after the Defenders, I'm a little bit sick of Karen. Alright, maybe not sick of Karen, but I kind of wish that some of the other secondaries would have more expanded roles. So, I don't know. Even though they didn't interact, it would have been nice to see Trish get some love. But, I don't know. Karen makes sense. So, I'm not going to knock it too hard. Definitely a much funner episode, much more fast-paced. Fucking amazing interrogation / death scene. So that was definitely fun. The two characters that I thought were reporters for some sort of like big paper or something like that, it turns out they're actually like CIA or NSA cops or something. So I totally messed that up in the first episode, but these characters are pretty cool. Agent Madani is the female, and I still can't remember the other dude's name, but I like him. He's fine. He's cool. This episode also had one of the most awkward dates I've ever seen on television, although strangely enough not the most awkward date I've been on in my real life. So I could kind of commiserate. It looked fun. It was kind of nostalgic. Good episode. This one, just like most of the other Marvel TV shows on Netflix, it's the second episode, and it's definitely sucked me in. I'm kind of mad at the first episode for not being more like this. The first episode really dragged in the first half hour. This one did not. This one was all plot all the time, an essential episode, key episode. So I'm excited to see what happens. It's already like 11:30 and I've been up since 5, so I think I might be able to make it through one more, and then I'll have to finish a bunch more tomorrow. Okay, so I got through episode 3 last night, well, all except for about 5 minutes, and then passed out immediately. So I'm doing this part of the review the next day, hence the wardrobe change. So episode 3, Kandahar. Probably the best episode yet out of, the 3 episodes. If this is what we're getting for the rest of the series, sign me up, man, because this is what I wanted. This is what I was expecting. This is deep. This is powerful. This is, I don't know, it reminded me a little bit of 24, like some of the earlier seasons, but much, much darker. This one shows a lot of flashbacks. We've been hearing a lot about Kandahar and what happened in Kandahar for the beginning 2 episodes of the season, or rather series. Now we finally get to see what actually happens. We're seeing a lot of flashbacks of Frank Castle in Kandahar and what happened there, how he became a part of a black organization. Him and a couple of other characters that have been popping up in this. And you get to see the really dark side, the really inhuman side of war. Something that, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want to, I do believe actually does happen. As a matter of fact, I think people would be naive to believe that stuff like this doesn't happen in multiple governments, not just the United States. But that was really cool. But that's not the only flashback we've got. We also saw a flashback with Micro, seeing how he turned from a lowly NSA analyst, a regular family man, to basically being labeled as a terrorist. And we got to see some really interesting turns, some dirty NSA agents, some dirty Homeland Security agents. So that was definitely awesome. It's hard to really review the show without spoiling everything, especially seeing as though the series is brand new. So, I'm giving you guys light spoilers here, but I don't want to give away absolutely everything. But this is by far the best episode I've seen so far. Like, small little recap. Episode 1, pretty slow, but I'm down with it. Episode 2, hell yeah. Episode 3, man. That's where this becomes religion, man. This was a good episode. So, let's dive into episode 4. I'm ready for this. Okay, episode 4. This episode is powerful in a lot of other ways. And it's not actually primarily because of Frank and Micro this time. Yes, I know he's Lieberman, but he's always going to be Micro to me! So, this episode, just touching on Frank and Micro, we finally got to see Turk. He seems to pop up in every single series that we've got from Marvel on Netflix, so we got our obligatory Turk. Awesome. We got the comic relief. We got a pink Luger, so that worked. I'm fine with that. Granted, no ammo, but cool. Which leads us to a confrontation and kind of a cool car chase, very Gone in 60 Seconds like, ending with a game of chicken between Frank and Madani. We're going to go with Madani. The Homeland Security agent, who is actually pretty damn badass. And afterwards, he does admit that he's the one that killed Wolf because he was fucking dirty. And don't get in my way. Badass scene, man. Absolutely badass. You're really seeing how flexible Micro's moral code is, whereas Frank is we're killing them. And there is no conversation about it. Which, again, I don't see him as a hero. I'm seeing him as a hero in the same way that I see Walter White as a hero. And if people think that a character like Frank Castle is glorifying this type of vengeance and violence, well then you also need to say that Walter White was glorifying the whole idea of cooking crystal meth. Because I see very little difference in that. Both of them are killers. Frank just happens to be extremely good at what he does because of all of his training and the fact that he really has nothing to lose. So I do not see him as a hero whatsoever. I'm very hesitant to even call him an anti-hero. He's basically a villain that I can get down with because the other villains happen to be worse. So, very Al Simmons, to a degree. And I'm kind of comfortable with that parallel right now. I really am. But this episode wasn't as powerful just because of the Frank Castle and Lieberman storylines, which was definitely awesome. This one was really powerful to me because of the depiction of PTSD. And again, talking about the glorification of guns and violence, you've got your NRA veteran that's in this support group that's run by one of Frank's old comrades, Curtis. So you've got those people, but again, it doesn't really show them as, people you want to be down with. It shows them as the crazy guy that's saying, they're taking our guns! So this episode was really powerful to me because of the PTSD, like I was saying. It's showing a character named Lewis. He ends up digging a foxhole in his backyard because, and I believe this part happened in episode 3. Again, binging these, it's sometimes kind of hard to tell, but he was having a nightmare and accidentally almost shoots his dad. And his dad, all he wants to do is comfort him and tell him it's okay because he understands that, he's going through some shit. He wants to be there for him. But Lewis takes this really, really deep and really personal, and he's broken up about the fact that he almost killed his father. So he digs a foxhole in his backyard. And Curtis approaches him about it, and Lewis ends up saying that at least back here, he doesn't have any nightmares. Over there, 50 guys stinking up a dorm, he never had nightmares. He slept well over there. But over here, now that he's away from the combat and the fighting, he's not sleeping so well. So he's decided he's going to join Anvil. Anvil, run by Billy, another one of Frank's old comrades, and one of the other guys that was in Operation Cerberus, which is, from all the flashbacks in episode 3, Kandahar, which is still already the best episode of the season so far. Billy, oh my god, man, Billy. Running essentially a privatized militaristic operation, or military operation. Watching Billy made me want to play Metal Gear. All I could think of is Big Boss recruiting the Diamond Dogs and creating Outer Heaven. That's all I could think about. I'm not huge on the Punisher comics, though after watching this, maybe I should be. I already picked up a bunch of Daredevil and Iron Fist, so maybe I should. Maybe this is going to be the bridge that gets me into Daredevil, or gets me into the Punisher. But Billy just seems really interesting. I haven't pegged him as a hero or a villain yet, although I'm leaning more towards villain, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. He just reminds me a lot of Big Boss from Metal Gear, and I cannot wait to see what keeps happening with this storyline with him and Anvil. And Curtis seems very, very apprehensive of them. So that was the most powerful stuff to me, was the depiction of PTSD and the way these veterans that are in lots of these elite forces that are sent over to the Middle East, and this has been going on for the better part of 30 years. It's very interesting to me to show this type of depiction. Again, not glorifying anything, but showing truth through fiction. I thought it was really cool. And obviously not every case is like people like Lewis or NRA douchebag or Curtis. But it's very, very cool. This was a powerful episode for me, and I'm excited to see what happens in episode 5. Okay, episode 5. Not their strongest one so far. Definitely a lot of cool stuff in this, though. Madani is, after the car crash from the last episode, she's kind of diving deep into the history of Operation Cerberus. She's got a list of names of some of the people that were involved, including Gunner, who was this kind of scripture reading guy. He was featured a couple of times in the flashbacks in episode 3, Kandahar, the best episode so far. So this episode introduces us to him in the present day, he's kind of hiding out, kind of mountain man style, and Frank goes to talk with him to try to find out what more he may know about all of the people in Project Cerberus that kind of betrayed them and ultimately led to the death of Frank's family. At the same time, you find out that Agent Orange has been bugging the Homeland Security Office's main like director's room, or maybe they've got the whole place wired for sound. Hard to say. But he overheard Madani diving into Gunner, and as well as some of these other ones. So he dispatched a force to get rid of him. It just happens to be the same time that Frank's there. So this is kind of interesting. It was a really cool scene. It's like 10 on 2 in the woods. There's bows and arrows. There's booby traps. There's a lot of guns, and the helmet cameras. Here's the only weird thing is, does anybody else think that Agent Orange kind of resembles Herr Starr from Preacher? I mean, maybe a couple more cuts around his eye, but with that dead eye, all I could think about is Preacher, and all I could think about is him getting ass fucked by a fat British guy. So, I haven't read the Punisher comics. Maybe he's in there, maybe he's not. I don't know. I'm purposely trying not to look up a lot of the stuff from the comics because I don't want anything unintentionally spoiled for me, despite the fact that I'm potentially unintentionally spoiling things for you. But if you've made it this far, you kind of know how I'm talking about these. Especially in the vlog format, I'm being a lot more candid. I'm not cutting out nearly as much as I would. But definitely a cool episode. A lot of exposition in this one. I could see this one kind of being the base that a lot of the through lines kind of branch out of. Yeah, solid episode. Not too much to say about it. Basically just a lot more exposition, a lot more character development. A couple of really cool scenes. Madani is really turning into a badass character. I'm really liking her. She also brings in Karen Page, kind of interviews her, and it's almost like a battle of wills. You know, I think both of them kind of know what the other one knows without the other one actually saying what they know type of situation. And Karen just kind of describing when she meets up with Frank after that meeting exactly what we've all been thinking about him. That he's this big, vacuous, empty void of loneliness and despair. And that's all she can see when he looks at him. And honestly, that's really who Frank is coming across, or what Frank is coming across as in the series. And Bernthal is doing phenomenal as far as that portrayal. He's doing absolutely great. And I think I'm over the fact that he's not shot out. You can't protect him, Rick, anymore. That's all I could think about in Daredevil Season 2, despite the fact that he turned in an amazing performance. I think I'm over it. I think I finally prefer Frank Castle to Shane, as far as his portrayals. But, alright, let's do episode 6. And then, honestly, I can't stop watching the show. We'll probably go further. Okay, so let's do episode 6. Holy Shinto, I didn't exactly see that coming. Okay, well, as far as this episode goes, episode 6, episode 5 was definitely a character building episode, but I feel like this one was much, much more of a character building episode. This one, you got to learn a lot more about the kinship and the relationship between Billy Russo, the guy that runs Anvil, and Frank Castle. He's reaching out to him. Billy's reaching out to Frank. I mean, you're starting to see Madani trying to kind of like play the game a little bit to try to, it seems like, get Billy to almost like do her bidding a little bit to try to get Frank to come out in the open, join up with Homeland Security. So not a whole lot of stuff that I really want to talk about in this. It's mostly much more just diving in deeper with the characters that we've already met, understanding them, feeling for them a little bit more. And then we get the ending. I didn't exactly know how to take Billy. I do now, and my intuition was definitely right. Looks like Billy's a bad guy. Which, interestingly enough, I kind of, sort of figured out, because after the whole Diamond Dogs thing, where I'm seeing Anvil and the way Anvil's recruiting people, the way Billy's recruiting them, I even made mention that it feels a lot like Big Boss and Metal Gear, creating the Diamond Dogs and Outer Heaven, ultimately. So I texted Aaron O'Brien over at Synthaholics to find out if Anvil was actually in the comics or not. And apparently the answer is yes, and it's run by Jigsaw. So I kind of figured that a dude with the name Jigsaw was going to end up being a bad dude. I still haven't Googled him, so I don't exactly know. But if Anvil is run by a dude with the same name as the killer in a horror movie, I'm pretty sure it's not a good guy. And seeing as though Billy runs Anvil, I kind of put two and two together. What I did not assume is that he was going to be working with Agent Orange. These Marvel Netflix shows tend to have a villain part 1 and a villain part 2. Breaking down the season. Like, for instance, Daredevil Season 2, you had Punisher and Elektra, as well as the Hand. You know, Daredevil Season 1 was pretty much Kingpin all the way through. Jessica Jones, pretty much Killgrave all the way through. You got Luke Cage, you've got Copperhead, or excuse me, Cottonmouth, and then you've got Diamondback, and all the other plots there. This one, I kind of thought you were going to have a villain part 1 and a villain part 2. Doesn't exactly look like that's going to be the case. It looks like it's all kind of interconnected. Maybe one of them is going to die off. We're going to be going into episode 7 here. This is usually where Marvel shows kind of plummet a little bit and go into unnecessary episodes territory because they're just trying to get up to their 13 episode run. So it's possible that we're going to have that next big episode in episode 7 where one of the big bads is going to die and then the other one's going to carry on for the rest of the season. But we've learned so little about them all that we've learned so much about the protagonists. We've learned so little about the antagonists, which I think is really, really cool the way they're doing this, because they're keeping that air of mystery in a way that I haven't seen done since we got Killgrave and Jessica Jones. So I kind of don't think that's going to end up being the case here. I think that we're going to have the same villains, maybe 1 or 2 add-ons throughout the entire season, and then it's going to come to a head. But I guess we'll see. Decent episode, really decent. Still nothing like episode 3, Kandahar. But I'm excited to see where this is going. This show definitely has me in. I hope it's got you guys in too. So let's keep going.